Section 1 of Dere Mable. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rob Kunkel. Dere Mable. Love Letters of a Rookie by Edward Streeter. Dere Mable. I guess you thought I was dead. You'll never know how near you was to write. We got the tents up at last though, so I got a minute to write. I guess they chose these camps by mail order. The only place they're flat is on the map. Where our tents is would make a good place for a Rocky Mountain goat if he didn't break his neck. The first day the captain came out and says, "Pitch your tents here." Then he went to look for someone else quick before anybody could ask him how. I wish I was a captain. I guess he thought we were Alpine chasers, Mable? But you probably don't know what those are. Honest, Mable, if I'd put in the work I done last week on the Panama Canal, it would have been workin long before it was. Of course there was a lot of fellos there with me, but it seemed like all they did was stand around and hand me shovels when I wore em out. The captain appreciates me though. The other day he watched me work a while and then he says, "Smith." He calls me Smith now. We've got very friendly since I've been nice to him. I noticed none of the other fellos had much to say to him. I kind of felt sorry for him. He's a human bein even if he is a captain, Mable. So every time I saw him I used to stop him and talk to him. Democratic. Thats me all over, Mable. "Smith," he says, "if they was all like you round here war would be hell, no joke." By which he meant that we would make it hot for the Boshes. I've been feelin awful sorry for you, Mable. What with missin me and your fathers liver gone back on him again, things must have been awful lonesome for you. It isn't as if you was a girl what had a lot of fellos hangin around all the time. Not that you couldnt have em, Mable. But you don't and theres no use makin no bones about it. If it hadnt been for me I guess things would have been pretty stupid, though I don't begrudge you a cent. You know how I am with my money. I guess you ought to know anyway, Mable. Never talk of money matters in connection with a woman. Thats me all over. Now I got started and found a fountin pen at the YMCA givin away paper like it does I'm goin to write you regular. They say they are goin to charge 3 cents for a letter pretty soon. That aint goin to stop me though, Mable. There aint no power in heaven or earth, as the poets say, as can come between you and me, Mable. You might send a few 3-cent stamps when you write. That is, if your fathers able to work yet. And willin, I should add. Of course it aint nothin to me but I'd keep these letters what you get from me as a record of the war. Some day you can read em to your grandchildren and say, "Your grandfather Bill did all these things." Aint I the worst, Mable? Serious though, I havent found none so far what has thought of doin this except the newspapers. I guess Ill get a lot of inside stuff that they'll never see. So this may be the only one of its kind, but it doesn't matter to me what you do with them, Mable. Later I'll tell you all about everything but I guess you wont understand much cause its technical. Lots of fellos are gettin knitted things and candy and stuff right along. Don't pay no attention to that though or take it for a hint cause it aint. I just say it as a matter of record. Independent if nothin. Thats me all over. Yours till the war ends, Bill. Dere Mable. Having nothin better to do I take up my pen to write. We have been here now 3 weeks. As far as I'm concerned I'm all ready to go. I told the captin that I was ready any time. He said yes but that we'd have to wait for the slow ones cause they was all goin together. I says was I to go out to drill with the rest. He says yes, more for the example than anything else. Its kind of maddening to be hangin around here when I might be over there helpin the Sammies put a stop to this thing. In the meantime I've been doin some guard duty. Seems like I been doin it every night but I know what there up against and I don't say nothin. Guard duty is something like extemporaneous speaking. You got to know everything you're goin to say before you start. Its very technical. For instance, you walk a post but there aint no post. And you mount guard but you don't really mount nothin. And you turn out the guard but you don't really turn em out. They come out themselves. Just the other night I was walkin along thinkin of you, Mable, and my feet which was hurtin. It made me awful lonesome. An officer come up and he says why don't you draw your pistol when you hear someone comin. And I says I don't wait till the sheep is stole. I drew it this afternoon from the supply sergeant. And I showed it to him tucked inside my shirt where none could get it away from me without some tussle. You bet, Mable. But it seems that you got to keep on drawin it all the time. Then later I hear footsteps. I was expectin the relief so I was right on the job. And a man come up and I poked my pistol right in his face and says halt. Who goes there? And he says officer of the day. And bein disappointed as who wouldnt be I says, "Oh hell, I thought it was the relief," and he objected to that. The relief, Mable, but whats the use? You wouldnt understand it. Theres some mistake up north, Mable, about the way we're built, Mable. Its kind of depressin to think that you could forget about us so quick. Everyones getting sweaters without sleeves and gloves without fingers. We still got everything we started with, Mable. Why not socks without feet and pants without legs? If youre makin these things for after the war I think youre anticipatin a little. Besides its depressin for the fellos to be reminded all the time. Its like givin a fello a life membership to the old soldiers home to cheer him up when he sails. I was sayin the other day that if the fellos at Washington ever get on to this theyll be issuin soleless shoes and shirtless sleeves. Its gettin awful cold. No wonder this is a healthy place. All the germs is froze. I guess their idea of the hardening process is to freeze a fello stiff. Captain said the other day we were gettin intensive trainin. Thats all right but Id kind of like to see those steam heated barracks. Youve read about those fellos that go swimmin in the ice in winter. I guess thed like our shower baths. They say cleanliness is next to godliness, Mable. I say its next to impossible. I started this letter almost a week ago. I just found it in my bakin can. They call it a bakin can but its too small to bake nothin. I keep my soap in it. I got some news for you. The regiment is to be dismantled. The Captain called me over this mornin and asked me where Id like to be transferred. I said home if it was the same to him. So theyre goin to send me to the artillery. This is very dangerous and useful limb of the service, Mable. I dont know my address. Just write me care of the General. I got the red muffler that your mother sent me. Give her my love just the same. Yours relentlessly, Bill. Dere Mable, I havnt wrote for some time I had such sore feet lately. When they broke up our regiment and sent me over to the artillery I thought I was goin to quit usin my feet. That was just another rumor. Thanks for the box of stuff you sent me. I guess the brakeman must have used it for a chair all the way. It was pretty well baled but that dont matter. And thanks for the fudge too. That was fudge, wasnt it, Mable? And the socks. They dont fit but I can use them for somethin. A good soldier never throws nothin away. And thank your mother for the half pair of gloves she sent me. I put them away. Maybe sometime shell get a chance to knit the other half. Or if I ever get all my fingers shot off theyll come in very handy. The artillery's a little different from the infantry. They make us work harder. At least theres more work on the schedule. I know now what they mean when they say the artillery's active on the Western front. They got a drill over here called the standing gun drill. The names misleading. I guess it was invented by a troupe of Jap acrobatics. They make you get up and sit on the gun. Before you can get settled comfortable they make you get down again. It looks like they didnt know just what they did want you to do. I dont like the sergeant. I dont like any sergeant but this one particular. The first day out be kept sayin prepare to mount and then mount. Finally I went to him and told him that as far as I was concerned he could cut that stuff for I was always prepared to do what I was told even though it was the middle of the night. He said fine. Then I was probably prepared to scrub pans all day Sunday. I dont care much for horses. I think they feels the same way about me. Most of them are so big that the only thing there good for is the view of the camp you get when you climb up. They are what they call hors de combat in French. My horse died the other day. I guess it wasnt much effort for him. If it had been he wouldnt have done it. They got a book they call Drill Regulations Field and Light. Thats about as sensible as it is all the way through. For instance they say that when the command for action is given one man jumps for the wheel and another springs for the trail and another leaps for the muzzle. I guess the fello that wrote the regulations thought we was a bunch of grasshoppers. Well Ive got to quit now and write a bunch of other girls. Thanks again for the box although it was busted that it wasnt much good but that dont matter. Yours till you hear otherwise, Bill. End of section 1. Section 2 of Dere Mable. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Dere Mable by Edward Streeter. Section 2. Dere Mable, today's Thanksgiving. I'm thankful things aint no worse though Max Glucose what lives on the next cot says they couldnt be. Cheery and bright to the last. Thats me all over, Mable. Every man gets 18 ounces of turkey on Thanksgiving. All to himself, Mable. The sergeant says the committee on hay and beans on Washington decides that. Mine's inside. I'm most a fool for expression as the poets say. We had a great dinner. Soup and turky, dressing, cranberry sauce and pie and smashed potatoes. All in one plate. I wish you could have heard how the fellos enjoyed it, Mable. I know now why they call the turkys gobblers. Thanksgivin is a holiday. All a fello has to do on a holiday in the artillery is to feed the horses and give em a drink and smooth them out and take em for a walk and then feed em and smooth em out and feed em and give em a drink. It makes a fello feel like givin back $1 out of his pay at the end of the month. The horses has the softest of anyone, Mable. They dont even have to get up for breakfast in the morning. We bring it to em in a little bag filled with cereal. You tie this on their face. I guess they aint never been fed before the war broke out. When they see you comin they start jumpin around like starvin sailors. I dont guess they like cereal. I wouldnt either 3 times a day. I thought theyd give em somethin different Thanksgivin but not a chance. Theyre always hopin it'll be somethin else I guess. When they see the same old thing they get sore and try to step on your feet. The sargents stand way back and say go on in, they wont hurt you. And then when they land on your corn they say thats too bad you didnt do it right. I dont like sargents any better than horses. And I dont know as Im goin to like the Captin much better either. The other day I got laughin while I was standin in line. Just laughin to myself, not disturbin nobody. The Captin turns around and says, "Smith, are you laughin at me?" I says, "No sir," and he says, "Well what else was there to laugh at?" Thats the kind of fello he is. I didnt sass him back or nothin, Mable. Just looked at him and made him feel cheap. I saw him again in the afternoon. Of course I didnt salute. He says, "What do you mean by not saluting?" I told him I thought he was mad. Im glad Im not his wife, Mable. You never know how to take a fello like that. If I hadnt knowed they needed me Id have given em 2 weaks notice on the spot. Duty before pleasure though. Thats me all over. We took the guns out to drill the other day. The Captin was talkin about indirect firin. Thats the way he is. Nothin straight forward about him. I asked the Sargent about it. He said indirect firin was where you shoot at one thing and aimed at another. I hate to butt in, Mable, but it didnt seem right. I says I seen the Indian girl in the circus shoot the spots out of a card over his shoulder but wouldnt it be more sensible to cut out the trick stuff till we was more used to the thing. You cant argue with sargents though. Day after tomorrows inspection. They do it every Saturday. Thats another thing Im thankful for. Theres only one Saturday a week. We pull everything out and pile it on our cots. Then the Captin and the Sargent comes in. Every time its the same. He says, "Thats very dirty, Smith. Wheres your other shirt?" And I say, "I aint got none sir," and he says, "Sargent make a note of that." And then the Sargent writes somethin in a little book. Next time just the same. The Captin says wheres my shirt and the Sargent makes a note. I guess theres somethin in the drill regulations what makes em say that cause I aint got no other shirt yet. Well Mable, Im gettin hungry again now. Guess Ill have to stop and buy a couple of pies. We dont get nothin to eat for an hour yet. Yours till the ice cracks in the pail, Bill. P.S. I had to borrow a stamp for this letter. I went downtown yesterday and spent my last cent on a money belt. Its a good one though. Dere Mable, rainin today. No drill so Im going to write you. If I dont get no exercise I go all to pieces. Im back from the artillery into the infantry. Captin and I had different ideas about runnin things. One of us had to leave. Hed been there the longest. I left. Hot headed. Thats me all over, Mable. Were doin bayonet drill now. I cant say nothin about it. Its not for wimens ears. We have one place where we hit the Hun in the nose and rip all the decorations offen his uniform in one stroke. Then theres another one where you give him a shave and a round hair cut and end by knockin his hat over his eyes. And the whipper zip come over with a lot of bums and do the dirty work. I and the rest of the fellos go ahead and take another trench. I havent been able to find out yet where we take it. Its all worked out cientific. The fello who doped it out had some bean. The principle of the thing is to get the other fello and not let him get you. If the allys bad doped out some scheme like this the war would have been over now. There wouldnt have been no Huns left. It takes us Uncle Sammys, Mable? Theyre gettin up the thrift campaign now, Mable. First they sell us enough Liberty bonds to buy our brand new army and let us go home. Then they cram a lot of insurance at you what wont never do you no good after your killed. Then I guess they found that someone still had a couple of dollars left so they made us send that back home. Now theyre gettin up a thrift campaign, Mable. They dont want us to spend our money foolish sos we can buy the Singer building or a Ford or somethin like that when the war is over. Some one say that we was the highest paid army in the world. Besides all this money we get our bed and board. I guess they dont know that in the army bed and board mean the same thing. Mable? Still the same old Bill. Theyre always inspectin us. I feel like a piece of prize beef. They never inspect a man all the way through. Guess the inspectors get paid by the day durin the duration of the inspection. One day it's our teeth and another our heart and another our lungs. The other day we was all lined up in the company straight and the sargent says "Inspection arms." I lays down my gun and rolls up my sleeves. Just to show you how technical the army is. He didn't want to see my arms at all but my gun. How's a fello goin to tell, Mable? I went up for Thurs at breakfast the other morning. As usual the cook said "You seem to like coffee." Right away without stoppin to think or nothin I says back "Yes, thats the reason I'm willin to drink so much hot water to get some, Mable?" Went to a dance the other night and met some swell girls. I made em all laugh. I says I guess I got the instincts of a soldier all right. The minute I smell powder I'm right on my toes. I havent been very well lately. I guess Ill cut out eatin at meals. It spoils my appetite for the rest of the day. I know you'll be glad to know my feet aint hurtin so much. Remember me to the hired girl and your mother. Yours through the winter, Bill. Dere Mable. Thats French. I didn't expect you to know what it means though. The YMCA are learnin me French now. I only had 3 lessons so far but I can talk it pretty good. You know how quick I am at pickin up any kind of trick stuff like that. The only difference between French and English is that there pretty near alike but the French dont pronounce their words right. When I use French words Ill underline them. Thatll give you some idea of the language. When we get voila as the French say for over there itll come handy to be able to sit down and have a dozy doze with them poilus. That means chew the rag in English. A poilus, Mable, is a French peasant girl and they say that they are very belle. Now don't mispronounce things and get sore till you know. You pronounce that like bell and push button. It means good lookers. Theyre crazy about us fellos. They call us Sammies. They named one of their rivers for us. You have heard of the Battle of the Samme but I dont suppose you have. They have been learnin us a lot about gas at attacks lately. Theyre not the kind your father has. These are more like the open places on the street in 6th Avenue. Only in the army when anything like this happens they give you a gas mask. A gas mask is like a cracked ice bag with windows in it. And in the front they got a cigaret holder. I always heard how the French was cigaret fiends. I guess they got it so bad they put it in the holders sos they could smoke during a gas attack. I'm going to put on my mask and have my picture taken en cabinet. Thats nothin to do with furniture, Mable. Its the French for what its goin to look like when its done. The gas fello said the other day that gas was perfectly safe cause you could always tell when it was comin. You could hear it escape or see it or smell it. The only trouble was, he said, that when the gas started the machine guns made so much noise you couldnt hear it and it always came at night so you couldnt see it and when you smelled it was most late to bother anyhow. I've been thinkin that over. Seems to me theres a joker in the contract somewhere. Ask your father to read it over and see if it sounds droit. Thats French for right. To him. Better still, ask Higgins the grocer to give it the once over. Hes got a grand tete, as the French say when they mean brains. Its getting frappier and frappier down here. Meaning colder and colder. It got so cold that I put on those socks that you knitted me. I guess I wont any more though. I guess my feet are gonna look like corduroy the rest of my life. You'll understand no hard feelin I know. You know how delicate my feet is and how I cant afford to prenez a hazard with them. Thank your mother for the flannel pajamas. I wear them every night over my uniform. I got to quit now and read some picture postcards that some girls sent me. Good night. Or, as the French say, robe de noit. End of section 2. Section 3 of Dere Mable by Edward Streeter. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Dere Mable by Edward Streeter. Section 3. Dere Mable, I havent wrote for some time because I been made an officer. A corporal. I admit I deserved it. I didnt apply for it or nothin though. They just come and told me. Bein corporal means I dont have nothin more to do with details. And at the same time I got more details than ever. Thats the sort of joke that us military men understand. You couldnt get it probably, Mable. Its technical. Yesterday, being Sunday, me and a couple of other officers borrowed a couple of mules from the stable sargent and went for a ride. We saw a cabin that they said was a moonshiners hut but it was broad daylight so you couldnt tell of course. Its still cold. I wish they'd hurry up and issue those gas masks. They'd come in handy these cold nights. The sargent told me that I was going to do interior guard tonight. I guess I'm lucky to get indoor work this weather. You never saw such a place for roomers. These are army roomers. They havent got nothin to do with the kind your mother used to take in. We hear that we're goin next week and that we're not goin at all but we're goin to be used to guard the Chicago stockyards. Then we hear that all the mounted men are goin to be dismounted and all the dismounted men are goin to be mounted. And that the rest of us are goin to be made cooks. And we hear that all non-coms are goin to be abolished. It's awful hard to tell what is goin on. I got your Thanksgiving box 2 days ago. It was only 10 days late. I guess the post office must have made some mistake. Things is usually later than that. It was in good shape except that the insides had been squoze out of the mince pie and somebody'd set a trunk on the turkey. Of course I divided it up with my squad. Big hearted. That's me all over. I'm awful popular with my men. They often say they wish I'd be made a major or somethin. My men ate up all the stuff. All I saved for myself was the white meat and half a mince pie. It certainly tastes good in the field. Of course we aint in nobody's field. That's a military expression. I cant explain it. I got to quit now and post a guard. At the same time I'll post this letter to you. That's a joke, Mable. I'm sorry this letter cant be longer but as a man rises in the army he gets less and less time to hisself. Olive oil. Yours faithlessly, Bill. Mon Cherry Mable. That's the way the French begin their love letters. It's perfectly proper. I would have wrote you sooner but me and my fountin pen's been froze for a week. Washington will never know how lucky he was that he got assigned to Valley Forge instead of here. It got us out of drill for a couple of days. That's somethin. I guess I'd rather freeze than drill. It's awful when they make you do both though. 2 of my men has gone home on furloughs. Me bein corporal I took all their blankets. The men didn't like it but I got a squad of men to look out for and my first duty is to keep fit. Duty first. That's me all over. I got so many blankets now that I gotta put a bookmark in the place I get in at night or I'd never find it again. We spend most of our time trying to find something to burn up in the Sibley stoves. A Sibley stove, Mable, is a piece of stovepipe built like the leg of a sailors trousers. Old man Sibley must have had a fine mind to think it out all by himself. They say he got a patent on it. I guess that must have been a slack winter in Washington. The government gives us our wood but I guess that the man who decided how much it was goin to give us had an office in the Sandwich Islands. I says the other day that if they'd dip our allowance in phosphorus we'd at least have matches, Mable? I'm the same old Bill, Mable. Crackin jokes and keepin everybody laughin when things is blackest. I was scoutin round for wood today and burned up those military hairbrushes your mother gave me when we came away. I told her they'd come in mighty handy some day. They say a fellow tried to take a shower the other day. Before he could get out it froze round him. Like that fellow in the Bible who turned into a pillow of salt. They had to break the whole thing off in the pipe with him inside it and stand it in front of the stove. When it melted he finished his shower and said he felt fine. That's how hard we're gettin, Mable. I bought a book on minor tactics the other day. That's not about underage attacks that live on ticks as you might suppose, Mable. It's the science of movin bodies of men from one place to another. I thought it might tell of some way of gettin the squad out of bed in the morning but it doesn't. All the important stuff like that is camouflage so's the Germans wont get onto it. Camouflage is not a new kind of cheese, Mable. It's a military term. Camouflage is French for a cauliflower which is a disguised cabbage. It is the same thing as puttin powder on your face instead of washin it. You deceive the Germans with it. For instance, you paint a horse black and white stripes and a German comes along. He thinks it's a picket fence and goes right by. Or you paint yourself like a tree and the Germans come and drink beer around you and tell military secrets. Well, I guess it's time to say Merry Christmas now, Mable. I guess it wont be a very Merry Christmas without me there, eh? Cheer up in case I'm going to think of you whenever I get time all day long. I'm pretty busy nowadays. I got to watch the men work. It keeps a fellow on the jump all the time. I like it though, Mable. That's me all over, isn't it? Don't send me nothin for Christmas, Mable. I bought somethin for you but I'm not going to tell you cause it's a surprise. All that I can say is that it cost me $4.87, which is more than I could afford. And it's worth a lot more. But you know how I am with money. A spendthrift. So don't send me anything please although I need an electric flashlight, some cigarettes, candy, and one of them socks that you wear on your head. I'll spend my last cent on anyone I like but I don't want to be under no obligations. Independent. That's me all over. You might read this part to your mother. I don't want nothin from her either. Write as soon as plain, Mable, cause I don't get much chance to study. Yours till the South is warm, Bill. Your mother's present cost me $3.77. Jolly Dam. Dont get that confused with Tinker's Dam, Mable. Tinker's Dam is technical and aint even French. I wish you knew more about these foreign languages. I always heard a fello could express himself better in French than anything else. Thats because nobody can understand him and he can say anything he wants. The Christmas holidays is over. I spent mine doin kitchen police. The only thing what peeled for me Christmas morning was potatoes and the only thing what run out was dishcloths. But I guess you aint familiar enough with the poets to get that, Mable. It shows that I can be funny and bright though even under adversary conditions. Kitchen police don't explain what I do very well. I don't walk a beat or carry a club or arrest nobody or nothin. I just... Well, I wish that hired girl of yours could come down and do kitchen police for a couple of days. She wouldnt be quittin as regular as she does. We celebrated Christmas by sleepin till 6:45 instead of 6:30. Only they forgot to tell the fello what blows the horn and he blew it at 6:30 anyway. Imagine if anybody home had told me I could sleep till 6:45 Christmas morning. I guess you know what I'd have told him, Mable? Theres a fello in town what says he'll send flowers anywhere you want by telegraph. I was goin to send you some for Christmas morning. Then I figured it was a silly idea. In the first place they'd get smashed on the way. And then you cant get enough flowers in one of them little envelopes to make one good smell. Nothin if not right. Thats me all over, Mable. I had dinner in town with Max Glucose's mother. Hes a fello in our tent. Shes a nice enough old lady but she aint military, Mable. We was walkin down the street before dinner and salutin officers so fast it looked like we was scratchin our foreheads. And every time we saluted she bowed. I didnt say nothin cause after all she was payin for the dinner. Later on though she says, I think its fine you boys has made so many friends among the officers cause I think there such nice men. Can you beat it, Mable? And when she went home she sent Max an officer's hat cord cause she said she didnt think it would fade as quick as that old blue thing he was wearin. I like to forgot to thank you for the Christmas presents you and your mother sent me. I'm glad you minded what I said about not wantin nothin although Id sent you 2 presents what was more than I could afford, $4.87. As I said to Joe Loomis who was in the tent when your presents came, it aint what the thing cost or whether you could ever use it for anything. Its the thought. Sentiment before pleasure. Thats me all over, Mable. Thanks for the red sweater, Mable. We aint allowed to use them. But you dont want to feel bad about that because I got lots of others and didnt need it anyway. And tell your mother thanks for the preserves and cake. I think thats what they was. They must have packed them between a steamroller and a donkey engine from the looks. Joe Loomis picked out most of the glass and tried some. Hed eat anything, that fello, Mable. He said it must have been pretty good when it started. Tell that to your mother. I know it will please her. I got so many presents from other girls and the like that its kind of hard to remember if you sent me anything else. If you did just tell me in your next letter and Ill thank you when I write again. I hope my presents arrived all right. I guess you'll like them. You ought to at the price. As I says to the girl what sold them when she says she didn't have nothin cheaper. Nothins too good for where theyre goin. Isn't that typical of me, Mable? Well, Mable, perhaps next year Ill send you a Dutch helmet maybe. It aint no use wishin you a happy new year cause I know how it'll be with me away and your father what he is. Yours regardless, Bill. End of section 3. Section 4 of Dere Mable. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Dere Mable by Edward Streeter. Section 4. Mon croquet. Thats not the kind with the evening dress toothpick in the top, Mable. A croquet is a French society woman. Study these letters of mine and see how I use the words. You ought to be able to pick up enough French to understand me talkin it when I come home. Well, Mable, New Years are behind us again. Once more I made a lot of revolutions. Its no use sayin there wasn't nothin for me to change. You're prejudiced. I can see faults where others cant. Underneath a pleasant exterior I am made of sterner stuff, as the poets say. I have gave up frivolity with the exception of goin into town once in a while to take a bath. I'm strong for this sanity stuff under any conditions. I'm makin a study of war. I'm goin to tell you a secret. I'm workin on a plan to end the war. I got thinkin, as I will, and it struck me that no one had gone into this at all. They're all figurin how to go on with it but none of them how to quit it. Dont say nothin till I get it worked out. I guess you always knew youd hear from me when I got goin, Mable? I also resolved not to put off till tomorrow what I can do today. Old motto. For instance, if I can get out of a fatigue today whats the use of waitin till tomorrow? The same with sleepin and restin. I cut out cigarets too. I was gettin to be a fiend. Got so I had to light one whenever I got thinkin. I was usin up most a package a day. Nervous and high strung. Thats me all over, Mable. I smoke cigars and a pipe instead. A fello with an active mind has got to have somethin. You remember what the fello what trained the high school show said when he saw me act? Temperature. Thats me. Of course its harder to borrow pipe tobacco and cigars. But Im tryin to show the fellos how bad cigarets is. Pretty soon Ill be all okay again. I got that watch your father sent me for a New Years present. Tell him thanks very much and not to feel bad because he forgot to send me a Christmas present cause this wipes out the debt entirely. He said it was a military watch and the latest thing out. I guess they call it a military watch cause it works 2 hours and stops 4. Its the latest thing around here. If I answered call by that watch Id be fallin in for a retreat around taps. Its so slow it cant stop quick. I got the blacksmith over at the headquarters company workin on it now. Hes an awful good man. He was a plumber in civilian life. Thats why they made him a blacksmith when he joined the army. He says hes gonna fix it so as Ill never be bothered with it again. I got asked to a dinner New Years night. I sat next to a colonels wife. It was kind of embarrassin at first. I put her easy though. I says whos that funny lookin old bird sittin across the room with a head like an egg. Hes very chic, isnt he? Thats a French joke, Mable. She says thats my husband. As soon as Id stopped laughin I started right in and told her the history of every man in the company beginnin with the A's. You know me when I get started. I didnt give her no chance to get embarrassed. When she started to say somethin I just kept right on talkin to show her that bein a colonels wife she wasnt expected to make no effort. I made good, Mable. I guess you know I would. After dinner I heard her ask somebody who invited me. Then she said somethin like hed ought to be known better. Never miss a chance. Thats me all over. It may mean promotion or anything. It may be that shell have me sent to Fort Silly to learn somethin. You cant tell. I cant think of anything more that you would understand. Dont show these letters to no one. There is too many spies around. I suppose you are awful lonesome without me. I dont get much time to be lonesome what with drillin and goin out somewhere. As soon as things get shook down a bit I hope to get more time to miss you. Hows your father's liver? Au revoir, Bill. Mon ami. Sounds like a scourin powder, doesnt it, Mable? As a matter of fact its the way a French lady talks to a fello shes awful fond of. Im not an officer any more. I was just goin to resign anyways. The Captains been watchin me rise and he didnt like it. He knew I knew more than him as well as me. Always askin me questions. Id always tell him cause I knew he had a wife and children in Jersey City and so I was sorry for him. Soft. Thats me all over. But the other day when I was on guard he said, Corporal, whats the general orders? And I says, Captin if you dont know them now you never will and I wouldnt be doin no service to my country if I told you. Cold but civil, Mable. You know how I can be. The Captin just felt cheap and walked away. I kind of felt sorry for him. I almost told him so once or twice. Then I went on guard again. I go on guard a lot. The men like me to be corporal of the guard because when the relief goes out I take all their blankets and go right to sleepin instead of standin outside and watchin them freeze. Men hate to be watched while they are freezin. But I happened to be outside for some reason goin to dinner I guess and I saw the Colonel comin. I says turn out the guard. No one really turns them out, Mable. They come out themselves. The Colonel sees who it is and waves and says, Never mind the guard, Corporal. So I thanks him and he goes back to the company and goes to bed. As soon as the Captin sees that the Colonel is savin me up for over there he gets sore. His plan has been to kill me before we left here. He said he was goin to reduce me. Thats not the same way your father reduces when he cuts out beer with his meals and sits in a Turkish all day. I never said you will or you wont. Just waited till he got outside and thumbed my nose at him. High spirited. Thats me all over. An English officer came over the other day and told us all about the war. He didn't quite finish it cause he only had 3/4 of an hour. They was quite a few things I didn't know even at that. He said that the heavy artillery was commanded by the CCODA and the light artillery by the COA. And theres a special NCO who has nothin to do but look after the SAA. Just imagine, Mable. I wish I'd studied chemistry more when I was in school. It would make things a lot easier for me now. Then he said that a man always got into his OO to observe the action of the 75s. These English are always great for dress and that formal stuff. I'm glad theyre tellin us this before we go over. It would have been awful embarrassing to have tried to observe the action of the 75s in my BVDs. I asked him if they had any trouble with the BPOEs. When he left he said cheerio. Without winkin a hair I says bevo. Same old Bill, Mable? They said the other day that my name was on a list to go in school and learn all about liason. I said there wasn't much use in their doin that cause I was pretty well up on that stuff. At home, I says, I had a reputation for a devil with the women. Nobody knows better than you, Mable? I guess thats a little over your head though, Mable. I try to be as simple as I can. If I'm not, just tell me. I'm writin this letter with my shoes off. I hope you'll excuse my being so informal but I'm havin the old trouble with my feet. They never been right since that winter I taught you to dance. I went to the doctor with them and he said to keep off'n them as much as I could. So they put me to work scrubbin the mess shack on my hands and knees. I bet if a fello had both legs shot off they'd prop you up against the wall and put you peelin onions. I got to quit now. They got a thing they call retreat they have every night. I always like to be there just to show the captin I'm behind him regardless. I'm sending you my picture in a uniform pointing to an American flag. It's kind of symbolical, the man said, if you know what that is. I thought you'd like to put it on the mantle in a conspicuous place so's to have somethin to be proud of when your girlfriend comes in to talk. I'd ask you for your picture only I haven't got much room for that kind of thing down here. Yours exclusively, Bill. Dere Mable. Everyone round here is going to school now so they can be specialists. Not the kind your mother goes to, Mable. A specialist only does one thing. I've been doin everything round here ever since I came. I was gettin sick of it. I went to the top sergeant and says I guess I'd like to be a specialist too. He said all right he'd make me a food specialist. Said I'd have to go into it pretty deep. I been into it up to my elbows in the kitchen ever since. Never trust sergeants. Least of all top sergeants. If it keeps on like this there wont be nobody to do the actual fighting but me, Mable. It's too much responsibility for one man. Suppose I was to get sick or somethin. And then a bunch of fellos went away to learn to be officers. That kind of struck my fancy, it being about the only thing I had it done round here. I went to the captin and told him I thought I'd like to go. He said I could go and then he added somethin. He said a company was built up somethin like a man. There was the brain, which was the officers, and then some was the muscle and some was the bone. He said I seemed to be pretty well fitted for my part by nature so's he wouldnt change me. I've always been strong ever since I was a kid, Mable. I wrote a poem. I sent it to the division paper. They wouldnt print it cause they said it was so real that it might depress the men. I guessed it was right cause I read it to the fellos in the tent and it seemed to depress them awful. I'm writin it to you. It's about the war. You'll probably notice that yourself if you read it careful. Here it is. Hear the thunder of the guns smashing down the German Huns and the sticky pools of gory blood soaking up the oozy sod. The rushing, roaring, shrieking boom of bullets crashing through the gloom. Listen to those great bumps bust on the quivering Hunnish crust. Listen to the shrieking, moaning, swearing, yelling, grunting, groaning that comes to us across the trenches all mixed up with gruesome stenches. Biff and from their hellish lair the shrieks of Germans rent the air. Bloody limbs lie on the ground, bits of Hun go flying round. Bang! And through the cannon's roar is plainly heard the splashing gore. But this cannot go on for long cause Uncle Sam is coming strong. And when we charge the German line we'll chuck the damn thing in the Rhine. And blood and slaughter, rape and gore and Belle la France will reign no more. Ain't that terrible, Mable? I read it to one fellow and he said it made him absolutely sick. He said he didn't see how I could write it without gettin sick myself. Just between me and you, Mable, I did come pretty near being once or twice when I was writin it. Most of that's all confidential, but I don't care if you read it to some of your friends just to give them a good idea of what war is. Some of the things aint very nice, of course. If you're writing big stuff though, you got to put in everything that comes into your head or else you lose the punch. I think the end's the best. A lot of fellos have said that. We ought to have more of that. It gets the slackers. The Rhine is a German river where they make wine near Berlin, Mable. You keep mentionin a fello named Broggins in your letters. Now I aint got a spark of jealousy in my nature. Big. Thats me all over, Mable. But I warn you frankly. If I ever catch one of these ailin enemies windin up your Victrola I'll kick him out of the house. Thats only fair. It isn't that I care a snap. Theres plenty of girls waitin for me. Its just the principle of the thing. Dont think for a minute that I care. I just mention it cause I couldnt think of nothin else to say. Yours till you hear otherwise, Bill. End of section 4. Section 5 of Dere Mable. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Dere Mable by Edward Streeter. Section 5. Pomme de mon oeil. You say that like oi oi in Yiddish. It means apple of my eye. I never saw an apple in nobody's eye, Mable, but I guess thats some French custom. Great news, Mable. A fello whats got a friend in the audience department in Washington just told me the wars goin to end about the 15th of February. Dont say nothin to nobody about it. It might look as if I was gettin mixed up in politics. I put in for a furlough on the 5th though. Then I wont have to come back, Mable? I'll bet you're glad. Its great to think of gettin to a place where you cant see through the walls and there aint 3 inches of mud on the floor. And think of not having to tie the doors together when you come in or crawl underneath them on your hands and knees and not having to put everything you own in the world under the bed. But I guess you don't care as much about these things as I will. This would be a good training camp for Arctic explorers. I bet the fello that picks out the camps either owns a cold storage plant in civil life or else they do it by mail order. It got so cold the other night the silver in the thermometer disappeared. It aint been seen since. We got a comical guy in the tent, Bill Huggins. Me and him's a pair. Keep everybody laughin all the time. Bill likes things hot about as well as me. Every night he fills a Sibley stove so full of wood that he has to hammer the last piece in. It gets so hot that it jumps up and down like a mad monkey. Thats the way Sibleys do when they get awful hot. We're not bothered by that much though. We got another guy thats a fresh air fiend. His name is Angus McKenzie. He's Scotch. He's so close himself that he has to have lots of air or he'd smother. Every night he pulls up the side of the tent by his bed. No one likes fresh air in its place better than me, Mable. But when its as fresh as this air is, its place is outside. I wake up in the night rolled into a ball like a porcupine. They's things in the middle of my back like his stickers. If I don't move I get cramps. If I do I freeze. All around the place where I'm layin is as warm as a park bench in winter. Sometimes I forget and push my feet down. Thats awful. One night I thought I heard the horn and stuck my head out of the blankets. It was Angus with his head and one arm outside snorin. Can you beat that? I bet he swims in the ice all winter home and has his picture in the Sunday paper. I froze my ear before I could get my head back. Thats the kind of fello he is. Its awful cold in the morning. They blow 3 calls. The first is just for the slow guys. I can make it nice from the march if I don't take too many clothes off. Thats no temptation. One guy jumps up just before assembly and makes a lot of fuss like hes getting dressed. He don't fool nobody. The only thing he takes off at night is his hat. Some say that falls off when he gets into bed. Angus gets up every morning in his BVDs. I think his skin is fur-lined. You can hear him smashing the ice in the pail with a hairbrush outside. Then you can tell he's washin by the noise he makes like a busted steam pipe. Then he comes smashin into the tent, leavin the door open, wipes the ice off in his face with somebody else's towel and says, "Gosh, thats great." I hate that kind of fello. Bill Huggins cleaned the stove with his towel last week so as everything would be neat for inspection. Angus got hold of it in the dark next morning. Gee, you'd have to laugh, Mable. I got the little tin mirror you sent, Mable. It's unbreakable all right. Bill Huggins got so mad at it he tried to break it and couldnt. The first time I looked in I got an awful start. I thought I was starvin. I looked like one of them pictures of hungry Indians that the missionaries show you just before they pass the plate. Bill Huggins swiped it later and says why didn't somebody tell him he was gettin so fat cause he couldnt go home on a furlough like that. He didn't eat nothin for 3 meals. Then he looked at himself with the mirror turned the other way. It's like one of those Coney Island places where a fellow can go in and laugh at himself for a dime. Next time send me one that will break. I got to quit now and buy a couple of pies before I go to bed. I dont sleep good unless I have a little somethin in my stomach. Dont say nothin about what I told you in the beginning. Until the 15th of February then. Yours faithfully, Bill. Dere Mable. The captain aint gonna give me my furlough. Says theres an order out against it. Someones got it in for me, Mable. I bought a woolly coat awful cheap from Bill Huggins. Right away theres an order against him. Angus McKenzie sold me a pair of leather leggins for less than he paid for them. Some bargain from Angus. The next day they issue an order that you cant wear em. Now they hear I want to go home and put out an order out against it. If they'd only come right out and say Bill Smith were gonna get you. Sneaky. Thats what I call it, Mable. Ive half a mind to transfer back to the artillery. If I transfer much they'll be chargin me extra fare, Mable? Only for me and the captain not bein able to agree I'd never have left. I understand hes been awful sorry since. All you have to do in artillery is to put a bullet in the gun. It does the rest. In the infantry you got to go up and do all the dirty work yourself. Besides, I'm gettin leery of these infantry fellos. Theyre always talkin about what we're gonna do to the Germans. Blowin em to pieces and slicin em up and throwin em all around the lot. I got thinkin what if the Germans was learnin their men to do the same thing. They never seem to figure on these things. And the bayonets, Mable. They aint safe. When you get a lot of fellos in a trench with their bayonets stickin every which way someones gonna get hurt, sure. I got those cigars your father sent me. Thank him and tell him if he ever gets taken like that again not to send such a large box. But, well, you explain it to him, Mable. You can do that sort of thing much better than I can. Outspoken. Thats me all over, Mable. Why is it that no matter how fussy a fello was when he wore a vest, as soon as he begins to call a coat a blouse, no one thinks he knows whats what? If you got any old magazines what was old before the war started, send em to the soldiers. They wont know the difference. Some woman sent our regiment the Baptist Review for 3 years back. That aint right, Mable. They'd give you candy that comes by the bale. Then they come round and watch you eat it. I bet if you walked into their place and watched them eat they'd raise an awful holler. They make speeches to you that you'd get your money back without askin up north. They give you free movies thats so old they look as if they was taken in the rain. It seems like feedin the hippo at the zoo, Mable. It don't matter so much as long as theres lots of it. I'm goin into town tonight with a bunch to eat a swell dinner on a china plate. All but Angus McKenzie. He eats all his dinners on me. I'm awful sick of eatin out of a tin fryin pan. When you put the food in it folds up like a jackknife goin the wrong way. It takes months to make a good mess kit eater. We get our mess from some fellos what stands behind a counter. One of them divides the coffee. He does it by puttin half in your cup and half on your thumb. The other fello has big spoons. I guess they are old lacrosse players. A big wad of food hits your plate splash and knocks it squeegee. The other fello hits the plate and knocks it the other way. When you get it all its runnin out of one dish up your sleeve and out of the other back into the food pans. Army food always runs. Cooks love loose scrub. Theyre awful stupid. If theres anything solid you get it in the pan with the rim on it. Then they pour the soup on your cover. When you sit down half of what you got left spills out on the table. It isn't so bad now cause everything freezes about as soon as it hits. You ought to see us eat breakfast, Mable. We got so many overcoats and things on that a fello dont get no elbow action. Some fellos eats with their wool gloves. That aint a good scheme though. It makes things taste like eatin peaches with their skins on. The fello that invented our eatin tables must have been a supply sergeant once. All the seats is nailed to the table. When you get a spoonful of loose food up some fello puts his foot in your lap and leaves a couple pounds of mud there. I just brush it off though on the next fello. Never complain. Thats me all over. Well, Mable, Ive got to shine my shoes now and go eat off in china plates with a nigger waiter. I dont eat with a nigger waiter, Mable. Its awful hard to explain things to you sometimes. So now I will close. Hoping you are the same, Bill. Dear Mable, I've been thinking of you a lot during the last week, Mable, having nothing else to do. I've been in a hospital with bronchitis. I guess I caught it from Joe Loomis. He comes from there. I'd have wrote you in bed but I dropped my fountin pen on the floor and bent it. I'm all right now. I got some good news for you, Mable. The cook says we only drew 10 days supply of food last time. He says he guesses when we ate that up we'll go to France. He's an awful smart fellow, the cook. He's got a bet on that if the Allies don't buck up and win the Germans is comin out ahead. Max Glucose, a fellow in the tent, is referee. We're eatin as fast as we can. Perhaps we can eat it all in less than 10 days. So maybe we'll be gone, Mable, before I write you from here again. There's a French sergeant comes around once in a while and says the war's gonna be over quick. He ought to know cause he's been over there and seen the whole thing. He smokes cigarettes something awful and don't say much. It's because the poor cuss can't talk much English. It must be awful not to talk English. Think of not being able to say nothin all your life without waving your arms around and then lookin it up in a dictionary. I feel so sorry for those fellows that I'm studyin French a lot harder so's they'll have something to talk to when we get over there. I'm readin a book now that's wrote all in French. No English in it anywhere, Mable. A fellow told me that was the only way to talk it good. I don't understand it very well so far. The only way I know it's French is by the pictures. Someday I'm gonna find out what the name is. Then I'm gonna get the English of it. Those are some pictures. Ain't I fierce, Mable? I guess that's why I get on with women so well. I gave up readin it out loud cause the fellows said it made them think they was in Paris so much they got restless. I can't speak no better yet. I guess that comes all at once at the end of the book. As soon as we got the hot showers all fixed up the pipes busted. So the other day the captin walked us all into town to take a bath. I didn't need one much. I used my head more'n most of them. Last fall when it was warm I took as many as 2 a week and got away ahead of the game. I went along though. More for the walk than anything. I saw the captin didn't make no move to take a bath hisself. I thought he might be shy. He don't mix very well with the fellows. I felt sorry for him. Everyone else was laughin and throwin things with him standin off and none throwin a thing at him. I went up and says, "Aint you gonna take a bath this winter too, Captin?" "Just jolly, Mable. That all." I says, "You don't want to mind the bunch. They don't care a bit. They're as dirty as you are anyway. Probably more." And I bet they were, Mable, cause I aint seen the captin do a stroke of work since we came here. Just stands round givin orders. I says, "If none wont lend you a towel you can use mine. I was gonna have it washed anyway." He got awful red and embarrassed, Mable. I thought he was gonna choke. He's awful queer. Just like the other morning he calls me over and says, "Smith, my orderly's sick. You can shine my boots this morning." He said it like I'd been beggin him to for a month. And then he says, "Smith, you can light the fire in my stove." He had me thinkin he was doin me favors. He said I might put some oil on his boots if I wished. I says that would be a great treat and I wish he wouldnt be so kind or the fellows would think he's playin favorites. I guess he didn't hear me, Mable, cause he'd just gone out. I said it anyway. I didn't care if he was there. Spunky, that's me all over. I couldnt find no oil for his boots anywhere, Mable, so I poured some out of his lamp. And then I don't think that suited him. Queer fellow, the captin. I keep hearin more about this fellow Broggins. I suppose he belongs to the Home Guards and wears his uniforms round in the evening. I suppose he has an American flag on his writing paper. It don't mean nothin in my life. I aint gonna put up no arguments or get nasty like most fellows would. Dignity. That's me all over, Mable. Let me tell you though, if I ever come home and find him shinin his elbows on the top of your baby grand I'll kick him down the front steps if I only have one leg to do it with. I'm writing this in the YMCA in the afternoon cause I'm goin on guard tonight. I don't see why they don't make it a permanent detail and be done with it. Someone said the top sergeant's a man of one idea. I guess I'm the idea. I didn't go out to drill this afternoon. I didn't say nothin to the sergeant though cause sergeants have an idea that if they don't get a lot of fellows to go out to drill with them they don't look popular. I got to go new so's to get in my tent before they come from drill. As ever on guard, Bill. End of section 5. Section 6 of Dere Mable. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Dere Mable by Edward Streeter. Section 6. Dere Mable. I would have wrote sooner but I've had such a cold I couldnt say nothin for most a week. Well, Mable, we ate all the food like the cook said but we aint in France yet. I guess he ain't got as many brains as he said he had. Everyone is sore at him cause we didn't kick at none of his food for more than a week thinkin that when we'd ate it all we'd go away. He thinks its funny and says, "Do yous guys think this war is a Coke's tour?" I hate fellos what tries to get out of things by bein smart. Everything's covered with mud including me. I seem to attract mud like I was a maggot, Mable. Yesterday I spent all the afternoon shining up for the guards so as to be the colonel's orderly. Then I step out of the tent and flooey. The sergeant says, "Smith, don't you know enough not to go on guard lookin like that?" I even got mud in my hair. Max Glucose says when he combs his its like rakin out a garden. From what I seen of him though I don't see how he found out. It's pourin rain and awful cold. It's so cold that the toothpaste rolls right off in your brush in the morning. The captain has a cold in his nose. He says he wont take the men out in such bad weather as today. Taint nothin against him, Mable, but I hope he has a cold all winter. There's a hole in the tent over my cot where the water comes through on me. I put a slicker over me last night. The water made puddles in it. Then when I turned over they spilt out into my shoes. This had me guessin, Mable, till finally I put on Max Glucose's shoes there instead of mine. Angus MacKenzie had so many holes over his cot that it looked like one of those safety fire sprinklers. He got up last night and rigged his shelter so's half the water hit it and run down into the next cot. He's a bright fellow, Angus, even if he is a foreigner. The other day he had some medicine for a cold. It says on the bottle that it was 17% alcohol. He drank the whole thing right down so's nobody couldn't get a hold of him. It made him awful sick, but he says that's because he isn't used to it for such a long time. Me and him's goin down next week to put in a stock of tonics. It's awful hard to write letters, Mable. Somebody's always fallin over your feet or draggin something wet over the paper if you got a cot near the door like mine is. And when you get goin finally at about the 4th try some sergeant always comes in with a list and makes you check up something. Sometimes I go over to the YMCA, Mable. But as soon as you get writin a bald-headed fellow jumps up and says, "Now fellows we'll all sing." All the fellows what's writin looks up and says, "Ah, one thing and another." I don't know who the bald-headed fellow is. They got one in every YMCA. They all look about alike. I guess there's a regular issue. There's always a bunch of fellows what don't seem to know why they came and they all start singin. Then I can't write no more or do nothin. So I come home and go to bed. Independent. That's me all over, Mable. Most of the taxis is swallowed up in the mud. There's only 2 or 3 runnin now. Only the big strong fellows can get to town. The cook says it's the old theory of the arrival of the fittest. But I guess you don't know nothin about science, Mable. When I go to town I wrap my blouse in a newspaper. If they know you're goin they give you a list of things to get that looks like a Chinese message to Congress. By the time you go to come home you got so many bundles you look like one of those fellows in the funny papers. Everyone stands in the square lookin for a hat rack waitin for the 3 taxis to come along. When they see one they rush it like they do in the movies when the millionaire's cars run over the poor fellow's kid. If goin over the top is any worse than getting under the top of one of them things with 50 bundles and as many fellows, then Sherman didn't know many swear words, Mable? But that's history and I guess you wouldnt understand. And then when you get home without a bath or a haircut or the movies or nothin and you forget to get that shaving soap for yourself and spend all your money they say, "Thanks, Bill. Put it over here. Can you change a $10 bill?" There ought to be a law against making money in such big numbers. I'm glad you taken up singin lessons again. You ought to take a lot of them. I got a favor to ask. I don't do that often. Proud. That's me all over. But if that fellow Broggins keeps buttin around sing for him, Mable. It aint askin much with me down here defendin you. Although I don't see why I had to come down here to do it. Yours internally, Bill. Dear Mable, this is the last time I will ever take my pen in hand for you. All is over among us. I felt it comin for some time, Mable. Today I'm on some letters that I got from girls with one from a girl what knows you well. She told me all about this fellow Broggins. She says you take him around with you everywhere. That's the kind of fellow I thought he was, Mable, but I'm surprised at you. She says you're awful fond of him and he's so cute. I ain't cute and ain't never pretended to be. A man's man. That's me all over, Mable. She says she went up to your house the other night and he was sittin in your lap stickin his tongue out at my picture on the mantelpiece. After that, Mable, there's nothin to say. So I repeat, all is over among us. I'm returnin today by parcels post the red sweater and the gloves that has no fingers and the socks that you wear over your head in your picture. Most of the stuff ain't been used much. The picture has some mud on it cause I had to keep it in the bottom of my barrack bag and my shoes came next. The socks I can't send back cause I sold them to Joe Glucose and you wouldnt want them now. The stuff that you sent me to eat I haven't kept. I guess you wouldnt want that anyway, Mable. The stuff that your mother sent me I'm gonna keep. She wasn't my girl and she didn't have to send all that stuff if she didn't want to. As for all the things I've give you, Mable, keep em. I don't want em no more. I aint even gonna mention all the money I've spent on you for movies and sodas and the Lord knows what not. I aint the kind of fello to throw that up to a fello or even mention it in no ways. I kept track of it though in a little book. It comes to $28.27 and some odd cents. And I aint a-going to hold it up against you that I've been savin in the bank for most 2 years so's to have a little somethin toward that house with the green blinds. And then I got somethin like $87.22 in the bank if you can believe what that eagle beak in the cage writes in your book. All wasted you might say when you think of the fun I might have had with it in the last 2 years. Those things we'll just forget. You seem to have already. And that seasons pass I got for you for the happy hour so you could keep in touch with things while I was away. Keep that and take Broggins. Otherwise I got a hunch you aint goin to the movies as much as you used to. I guess this will hit your father and mother pretty hard. They got nobody to blame but yourself. On the other hand its going to please some girls that I know. So its a poor wind that don't blow nobody round as the poets say. I guess you wont hear much about the poets anymore, Mable. All you'll hear about is Broggins. I hate a man what talks about himself. I suppose he has joined the home defense. Are you gonna have a military wedding, Mable? I'm kind of sorry for your father. If you have his liver on your hands don't blame me. You know the doctor said any kind of shock would set him off a mile. And now, Mable, I'm closing for the last time. It wont be no use runnin to the door when you hear the postman no more cause he wont have nothin but the gas bill. From now on the only way you'll hear from me is in the papers perhaps when we get over there. Now I'm going to ask you a favor, Mable, for old times sake. Take the picture I had taken pointin to the American flag and burn it up. You cant have that to show your friends no more and I aint gonna have no flatfoot makin faces at it. I may be selfish, Mable, but a girl cant make a cake and eat it too as the old sayin is. Give my best to your father and mother. Tell them I sympathize with them in their loss. Its no use writin any more cause I'm firm as the rock of Gibraltar. Concrete, thats me all over, Mable. As ever, yours no longer, Bill. Western Union Telegram. Received at Philopolis, New York. Miss Mable Gimp, 106 Main Street, Philopolis, New York. Dear Mable, how was I to know Broggins was a dog? You can send back all your stuff and make me some more if you want to. This telegram is costin me 9 cents a word so I cant say no more. Thrifty. Thats me all over, Mable. Bill. End of section 6. End of Dere Mable by Edward Streeter.